Every habit has a first time, often lost to history. We don't remember when we began it, we just always have done it. We don't remember exactly when this started, but we've continued it. We have seen its impact, its improvements, and its value. It gives us a resource to draw from, a skill set to rely on, and the ability to deal with an unexpected difficulty. I know from those first, now simple lessons from Schirmer piano lesson books, those books probably are nearly 100 years old now, I was able to gain the skills necessary to play the challenging sonatas of Beethoven, Mozart, and Liszt. The basics are always necessary to become a master in anything. As COVID-19 began to spread last year, I also began to look at the spread of my body. You know the stern look any medical professional gives you to the number that's always reported honestly on the scale. For months, I hemmed and hawed and pleaded and excused. I resigned and I resented. But then I chose to change. And it took a new habit. Walking along the lake shore of Nelson Park, from the Devon Amphitheater over to the US 36 overpass, down past the beach house, over to the fire hydrant next to Lost Bridge Road near the yacht club, and back to the Devon. Nearly 4 miles every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. That first walk along the path was brutal. It took nearly an hour and a half, and my legs and body ached and screamed at this new experience. What do you think you are doing? But with each passing week, each Tuesday and Thursday, the pounds drifted away when I chose to eat mindfully and walk faithfully. The breathing, the exertion became less labored, and the muscles grew stronger. I can do the hour and a half walk in just little over an hour. What made me fretful and loathing with every medical checkup became something to look forward to. It was showing up on the scale every time. I am sorry to break the bad news to you. The only way to become healthier is to eat better and to exercise more. No magic formula or secret foods, no pill, no specialized exercise equipment. Just honesty in eating and consistency in exercise. I've accomplished something I never thought I would do. I have walked the equivalent in miles of walking from here to Cincinnati in 1 year. Nearly 400 miles of walking. But when it is good on the scale, then it is tempting to take the shortcuts, to skip a little, to let it slide. And that always honest scale rewards such misbehaviors and shortcomings and slidings with an upward rise again. We have been looking at what is needed for a good life for several weeks and have now come to the end of our journey. Our lives are the accumulation of decisions and actions, both good and bad, wise and foolish. Our names become associated with a reputation that is far more valuable than wealth, and even wealth cannot stop the consequences of poor decisions and actions upon one's reputation. While we can obtain knowledge to become experts in something, many times wisdom is revealed by those still willing to learn, to change, and to grow, rather than to believe that they have all the knowledge they possibly need. We are wired to seek out community, and our lives are impacted by those who care for us, demonstrate responsibility, show empathy and kindness to those less fortunate. A good life must have something, some cause to live for, some reason to be, to do, to act. Because we are more often remembered by what we gave rather than what we ever had. By reputation, skill, community, and cause, Job seems to have it all and then some in our lesson today. Now, Job shouldn't be taken as a historical book. It's not the story of a man and his misfortune and the friends he keeps, as more of a myth, as more of a truth being revealed, not because it can be fact, but because we know of its reality. Job is described as blameless and upright, someone who feared God and turned away from evil. Job was so concerned about his children's possible misdeeds that he offered burnt offerings on their behalf, just in case. Yet despite his apparent business success, his leadership of a large family, and faithfulness, he loses. His business experiences a massive downturn from bandits. His children die in an unfortunate building collapse. His own body turns to incurable sores. Now, we are given an odd disclosure with the scene in God's court. Job's misfortune is due to a challenge given in God's presence that Job's good living is only blessing deep. As soon as blessings turn to adversities, Job will turn and curse God and die. Most of the scriptures seem to affirm what the Satan is accusing, and we need to be mindful here. The Satan here is more like God's district attorney, prosecuting and accusing, rather than a malevolent figure that we get later in the New Testament and in Revelation. This is just one among many in the court of God. But Scripture does seem to affirm this as truth, that obedience leads to blessing and disobedience leads to cursing. Your goodness leads to good fortune. Your disobedience will lead to punishment and misfortune. This contrast of reward and punishment still operates in our world today. Indeed, you could say that our entire legal system is based on this scenario. If you were good, then good things would happen to you. If you are good, then surely bad things cannot happen to you. And the reason this bad thing has happened to you is that you were foolish or disobedient. This clear correspondence between blessing and curse, fortune and poverty is mostly true. But Job reminds us that it is not always true. In the experiences of life, we come to see that there is no real correlation between the amount of wrong we commit and the amount of pain we experience. There are probably a great many wrongs we have done that had no real painful consequence to it. And a lot of the time we do right and still find ourselves knocked down in life. We understand suffering from the consequences of our poor decisions, attitudes, and reactions. What bewilders us is when we encounter undeserved suffering, suffering without explanation or causation. More often than not, even among religious people, we take Job's wife's attitude, who recommends to Job the simple statement of cursing God and die. Curse God and never desire to be in a relationship with God ever again. How many people do you know want nothing to do with God or religion because something they thought God should have prevented or exempted them from experiencing failed to happen? Job's suffering gives him two paths, away or towards God. And Job chooses towards. Perhaps the greatest mystery in suffering is how it can just as much bring a person into the presence of God in a state of worship full of wonder, love, and praise, as the closing scenes of Job inform us. There is not anything inherent about suffering to motivate this response, but drawing nearer to faith in the midst of suffering happens more often than we would expect. Yes, Job will shout and ask God what a lot of us mutter behind our sleeves. The pain and agony of the Psalms remind us that being angry with God is not sinning against God. If you read the poetry and prose of Job, at the end you discover the awful truth that Job asks for an explanation, but Job does not get an explanation. We simply take good and bad days as they happen to be. And Job gives us the question, never resolved. We take the good days from God. Why not also the bad days? And if you read Job, then the other things happen. Then the friends show up. And boy, are these real friends. The moment we find ourselves in trouble of any kind, people start showing up, telling us exactly what is wrong with us and what we must do to get better. Sufferers attract fixers the way roadkill attracts vultures. It seems to be inevitable that as soon as we confess, we're open to unsolicited advice. 3 friends come to Job, with a mysterious fourth that arrives later. And they press Job's diagnosis of desiring an explanation with a lot of what Scripture affirms, that surely Job must have done something wrong for these problems to be part of his life. Have you ever noticed how often those who willingly share their advice out of apparent compassion, with all kinds of Scripture quotes and prescriptions, make you feel worse rather than better? The answers they may offer are perhaps technically true, but are completely in error in context to the actual circumstances we face. In theory, it is right. In practice, it is entirely wrong. In every generation, some men and women pretend to be able to instruct us in a way of life that guarantees that we will be healthy, wealthy, and wise. What I've noticed with these health, wealth, wisdom purveyors is that they are often hiding their own health, wealth, and wisdom struggles with the cliches of positive thinking and the prattlings of religious small talk. Why is it that so many prosperity preachers need your money for their ministries? Real faith cannot be reduced to the spiritual bromides and the merchandise in success stories. The truth of Job is that faith is refined by both the fire and the storms of pain. If we want to reach out to others who are suffering, we should be careful not to be at all like Job's friends, not to do our helping with the presumptions that we can fix a thing, get rid of them, or make them better. First, we recognize that we don't understand the full nature of the problem to begin with. Second, the last thing people want is advice. And third, suffering is often greatest among those who are committed to following God more. Job begins with both a protest and prayer. Job's friends give explanations and answers. One way was much closer to God than the other. Most of life is a matter of habit and routine. They start and end. Job did not keep his patience, but he did keep his faith, enduring suffering until the good days did and always seem to return. We should not think of our faith as a way to evade suffering and difficulty, but a path where we can enter the mystery of suffering and look around for God. Though we long for a formulaic approach to living a good life in hopes that all will go well with us as a result, nothing in our lives is guaranteed. What habits and routines keep us grounded, focused, and remind us of who we are and whose we are can also keep us with something to hang on to when the waves of life threaten to roll over us. And the road to good health? Watch what you eat and get a comfortable pair of shoes and walk. Amen.